Good morning, welcome along to today's message from McCaig's Tower. So this is a landmark in Oban, and if I remember at the end I will take you for a little tour so that you can see the view because it is absolutely stunning. It's absolutely lovely. So today's message is all about muscle balance is the key to a healthy body. So we're going to take a look at how a muscle imbalance happens and what that does to your body, what effect it can have. And then we'll also look at how we can fix those muscle imbalances because that's the most important thing, right? How do we fix it? So how do your muscle structures work anyway? So your muscles are all connected. They're all connected from your feet right up to the top of your head. And they work, your muscles work in pairs. So when one muscle does something, it must have a pair that's going to do something else. That's my alarm going off. Oh my goodness. Up before it. So for example, let's use the elbow for starters, just because it's nice and easy for you to see, and we'll work our way down the body. So we've got our bicep and its opposing muscle, the tricep. So when I want to bend my elbow, my bicep needs to shorten, needs to tighten, and its opposing muscle, so the tricep, needs to lengthen. Opposite way, so on the way back down, this one needs to lengthen, the bicep needs to lengthen, and the tricep needs to to shorten. So really simple biomechanics. One muscle does something and its opposing muscle needs to do something else. And when they work in unison, life is good, life is happy. However, through general day-to-day activities, things happen where one muscle becomes short or really strong, or other muscles become weak and or long. So how does that happen? So for example, a repetitive movement. So if there's something that you do all the time, and again, I'm just going to use this, the elbow for now, just because you can see it. For example, if I did this movement lots and lots and lots, or maybe I decided I was going to go to the gym and I'm going to work my bicep loads because I want to have a really good bicep, but we don't stretch it out afterwards and we don't work the opposing muscle, we could end up that the joint is in a new fixed position. So my elbow no longer straightens because it can't. It's because this muscle is shorter and it's strong, and this muscle is weak and or long. So it doesn't have the strength to straighten it, and we don't have the flexibility here anymore to lengthen it. Okay, we're going to come back to what happens there. Another reason for a muscle imbalance or a compensatory pattern to happen is through injury. So let's look at a really common injury, which is the rotator cuff muscles. So these are the muscles that sandwich the back of your shoulder, the shoulder blade, and they are responsible for an awful lot of movement around your shoulder. But let's take for an example the reach. So I need to have lots of control, strength, flexibility around my shoulder blade for me to be able to reach my arm. So let's take the example that I'm going to reach, get my bottle of water, and then take a drink and put it back. However, because I have an injury around my rotator cuff, my brain is now going to send a new signal. So it sends signals to your muscles to contract, to strengthen. But if there's a block in the way, so maybe there's a roadblock or an injury, it's going to send the signal down new nerves, a new pattern, and it's going to shift to different muscles. So it's going to find a quicker or an easier or a less painful route. So every time I straighten out my arm and I reach, there's a pain signal now sent to my brain. So I'm going to send a new signal to bend or reach forward to pick up my bottle. So I no longer need to stretch. I'm going to bend, pick it up, and bend again to put it back down. Now, if the injury lasts over time or we don't fix the injury, this becomes a new habit for your body, a new pattern, because it knows that if it sends a signal to the shoulder blades or the rotator cuff muscles to stretch, it's going to get a pain signal back. So it's not going to do that anymore. And the longer and the more prolonged that we use this pattern to reach for our bottle, that is now the new quickest loop to get to my bottle. So every time I think, oh, I'd like a drink, instead of my brain sending a signal to stretch, it's going to send me a signal to bend. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that now I'm using different muscles and different parts of my body to do that movement. And then we're going to start to see different injuries and different pain happening. So for example, let's go back to the elbow. If this movement was happening because I can't straighten my elbow, or if I wanted to reach something from the top shelf and I can't actually straighten my arm anymore, and then I need to use my shoulder every time I want to reach something up high, eventually what might happen is that we end up with pain or overuse or overwork on the shoulder. And by the time you come to see us, you're complaining of a shoulder injury, whereas actually it came from the elbow. Or maybe by this point it's a neck injury because it's moved up. So everything is connected. One of the big things for me is posture and how we actually hold our body throughout the day. So if we're in a seated position for most of the day, and maybe I'll just move back a little bit. I need to go up my tiptoes to do that. So I might just move my camera in a wee second. So if I'm in a seated position most of the day, my hip is now going to be in a bent position for the day. So it's going to be in flexion. So all day I'm sat down and my legs are in this position. So this muscle here, your hip flexor, is going to become short. Possibly strong, not necessarily. And the opposing muscle, unfortunately, is your glutes. So your big bum muscle that's so important for so many activities is going to become lengthened. So if you can imagine that seated position and that stretch down your bum for most of the day and that shortening through the hips for most of the day, and then you go to stand up. And what can happen then, where can I put you so that we can see? I found a bench. It is a little bit wet, but I'm going to get a wet bum for the greater good. Okay, so if I'm in a seated position for the day, that is really wet, I'm going to end up with short hip flexors. And what that's going to do is when I stand up, my bum is not going to want to fire to actually physically open out the hip at the front. And that's going to... I've actually got a cat coming in now. I'm proper allergic to cats. I'm sure Rob doesn't have to deal with this. Okay, so when this happens, we then can sometimes see that the joint changes shape, or it changes how it sits when we're in a standing position. Because our body is so used to being in this position, it doesn't actually fire up all the correct muscles to be standing in alignment. Now this is called lower cross syndrome. So this is when we start to get really short and tight here, and we become long at the back. Now the function of the bum is to straighten your leg out behind you. It's to take your leg behind. Now if that's not going to happen because this has become really weak, we're going to start to use the muscles that sit below or above the bum. And this is when we start to get lots of aches and pains in the lower back, or we start to feel that the hamstrings are being overworked. As soon as I'm in this position, so my hips are now short, my bum's long, my back's going to be tight, and my tummy's going to be long and weak. So that's my core muscles now are starting to get long and weak. So all I'm showing you here is that when one thing happens in the body, it affects so many other parts of your body. So you sitting all day, you might not connect that to the lower back issue that you've got going on, but that tension in the hip flexor all day long can cause that to happen. And it's the same with the upper body. So if I'm sat typing all day, or if I'm sat on my phone all day, the same thing's going to happen. I'm going to overwork the muscles on the front. They're going to become short. They're going to just sit there because it's easier for them to do. It's an easier feedback loop for your brain to your muscle, and we're going to start to see length at the back of the body and to become weaker at the back. Last but not least, before I let you go, let's not forget about the ankle. So it's so important as well that we keep the muscles at the back of the leg long. We keep stretching them. We do overwork the calves quite a lot. I know I especially do. I'm just gonna leave this in because I'm sure a lot of you like cats. But what the ankle must be able to get full range of movement. So the ankle's range of movement is so important for walking, for squatting, for any, and when I say squatting, I mean standing up and sitting down, getting on and off the toilet, getting up and down out of a chair. I don't mean squatting in the gym, I mean functional everyday movement. So we must be able to keep the full range of movement at our joints. When we start to lose the range of movement at specific joints, we start to lose the ability to be able to reach behind us, to be able to stretch, to be able to bend down and pick something up off the floor. So muscle balance is really important. Things like posture, how you actually physically stand. Now, I'm so a bad example because I'm really conscious that I stand on one side, pop my hip out, and this is from years of waitressing or years of holding small child on the hip, and I'm sure so many of you can relate to this. And again, over a long period of time, we start to overwork muscles. Now, how to fix it is going to come later on in today's exercise of the day, but no wonder Rob gibbers on for so long. But before I go, let me just show you the beautiful view from Oban.